Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Jerry Hamilton and Jeff Howe. Hope everybody's having a good Sunday here. This episode brought to you by Allegiant Digital Marketing. Guys, we've been doing positional breakdowns throughout fall camp, and one of the ones we want to bring to your attention today were linebackers. And part of it has to do with what Sark said yesterday. He's really excited about his 4 linebackers right now. That follows into the discussion of how good is this group compared to other groups in the in the recent past. Jerry, you've been talking about how good you think they are overall as a unit. Jeff, you've been in on that conversation as well. Jeff, I want to start with you and ask you exactly what you heard Sark say yesterday.
Yeah, he was talking about depth, and I think when you look at the depth chart, I think we get kind of tied into, okay, who's going to be the first 11 out on the field on offense, who's going to be the first 11 on defense, but Sark is really trying to hammer this home. If you're going to win a national championship, you're playing 16, 17 games. I mean, you're playing in mid-January, so you need pretty much 1 through 85. You need to be able to count on dang near all those guys if you're going to win a national championship. And he said, look, in terms of a 2-deep, which is how he thinks of it, he feels like they've got 4 starting linebackers. He feels like Liona Lefau, Anthony Hill, Anthony Smith, and Trey Moore are all starting caliber players. Now, those guys probably aren't going to be on the field together, all 4 of them at the same time, but whether you want to run an even front, an odd front, nickel, dime package, whatever combination of 2 or 3 of those guys you have, the versatility you've got there on top of just the talent and the playmaking ability, that's where I think a lot of PK's creativity is going to come from in terms of the different looks he shows, what they throw at opponents. And I think, honestly, Bobby, I think they're versatile enough based on opponent, based on a week-to-week field. You can completely change it up and basically, because you've got a lot of high football like you guys in that room now, you could basically show almost a new look every week if you want to.
Well, you mentioned that, and so the 4 players that we're talking about here, 3 of them have a lot of experience as Longhorns. Trey Moore started as an edge last year. Anthony Hill's a returning starter. Liona Lefau is a returning starter. And then you have Anthony Smith. He's the newcomer of the group. Jerry, you've been extraordinarily high on Anthony Smith. Before we get into Anthony Hill, who is the rainmaker of sorts in that room, what is it about Anthony Smith that has allowed him, in your opinion, to kind of insert himself based on what we've heard behind the scenes and seen from him previously?
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting because, look, seeing him at Jasper, he's got super long arms. I mean, he's like +7 wingspan at 6'1" and change and 79, 80-inch wingspan. So he has very long arms. But, look, he's a guy that played wide receiver. He played wildcat quarterback. He played safety in high school. He played off the edge. He did everything. He split out at wide receiver at Jasper High, small school football. But the thing that I remember from really vividly remember from a conversation with the head coach, Coach Crumity at Jasper, is he said, he just picks up everything so fast he could play anywhere on a football field. So he's got a very high football IQ to go with the athleticism. A tremendous space player, can really close. And I've been out on this limb, and I'm going to remain this way. I think by late in the season, and I'm not saying he's going to be a starter, I think he's going to be the second best linebacker on this team. And that's saying something because Liona Lefau and Trey Moore, and I think Trey Moore's more of the hybrid guy, right? Kind of like a Brad Spence is playing exclusively edge, but he's still a hybrid player. I think Anthony Smith, Sark didn't call him a budding star for nothing. Let's always remember that. He said a budding star. Then he came back a week later, said he's had a great camp. Not good, great camp. I have a feeling Anthony Smith's going to be one of the more talked about players this year that wasn't headed into the season.
Interestingly, Texas has an established star at the position as well in Anthony Hill. Anthony Hill has been an interesting guy to follow. Sark has not utilized him full go in scrimmages at all times. Like, he's been held out a little bit, not because of injury, just because he wants to get other folks reps like Anthony Smith, like Bo Barnes, Liona Lefau, Trey Moore, etc. Jeff, returning All-American prospect, a lot of people consider Anthony Hill a leader of this team and a future first rounder. What have you heard behind the scenes on him and what he's done not only this training camp, but the summer and the spring that you think may have him ready to poised to be even a further breakout star for this team?
Yeah, you mentioned, you mentioned holding him back in scrimmages, Bobby. There's also something we said for your offense needs some confidence, and maybe you've got a guy that might be the best game wrecker in the front seven position in the country. So sometimes it's best to just hold him back a little bit and save him for the season. But no, I would say this about Anthony Hill, and I would say the same thing about Colin Simmons based on what I've heard. And I think Anthony's a step further, obviously, because he's a year older. But I think Anthony's in the mode of, he understands, like, he sees the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow now. Like, he knows this is it. Like, this is a contract year for the NFL. And it's not just that he's really talented and he's honing his craft, but I think in terms of his leadership, his work ethic, there's a certain, Sark will use the word intent. And when you watch Anthony Hill on the practice field, there's an intent with the way he goes about things. So I just feel like there's a sense of urgency and a focus that, when you've got a guy in a contract year, when he knows what's ahead of him, and he also knows his team can win a national championship, that's the kind. It's the same stuff, Bobby, that you saw for years from Nick Saban's guys that were going into that draft eligible junior year when they could see the NFL on the horizon. You just saw a different sense of urgency about him. I think you get that with Anthony Hill, but at the same time, I think the leadership with him is off the charts. And that's the other thing I could say about that linebacker room. I think between Anthony Hill and Liona Lefau and even Trey Moore, those are three incredible leaders. Your leadership core on defense, the biggest part of it might be at that second level. So I just feel like Anthony Hill's a guy that understands what's in front of him and hasn't wasted any opportunity to take advantage of it.
Jerry, you agree with Jeff's summation that he's just a major disruptor? Because I look at a defense and I say, okay, who's going to change a football game? Anthony Hill changes a football game potentially. I think Colin Simmons fits in that category. Do you put Hill in that same level or same category?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Look, and I think another year of growth as a true linebacker this year, he has a chance to be a top half of the first round prospect. But yeah, I think so. I think he's a disruptive force. Look, coming out of high school, he was a guy who, what did we all say about him? See ball, find ball, hit ball carrier, whoever that was. Well, that strength and that elite trait has carried over to the SEC and made him an all-conference level player and a potential All-American this year. I think he's one of the very best in college football at that size, speed, power ratio. He is a great downhill player. I want to say this too, though. With that style of play comes a rugged, beat-up body at the end of the season. I think the emergence of Ty Anthony Smith, one of the things we're going to see is Ty Anthony Smith can alleviate some of those snaps in games from Ant Hill, so Anthony Hill is healthier towards the last part of the season, because he plays a physical style of football. And if you can take a few snaps off his plate from game to game at time, and that guy that comes in is a really quality player, and you don't feel like there's a massive drop off, then that can make for an even better Anthony Hill late in the season and into the playoff.
Got to ask you guys both this. That we talked about a bunch of different pieces to this puzzle, but the one guy that kind of just gets thrown onto is Liona Lefau. Yet, listening to Steve Sarkisian talk about Liona Lefau, he doesn't see him that way at all. Not only does he see him as a good middle linebacker, he sees him as a great teammate. Yeah. And is always or consistently talking about how Liona Lefau is one of the guys on the team that everybody kind of loves and rallies around. Jeff, you've heard Sark talk about that a little bit. Your thoughts on Lefau and his role in this defense? Is he kind of I look at him and I think he's kind of like the steadying influence of the group.
Yeah, I mean, Sark has said time and again that, if you kind of poll everybody in the locker room, hey, who's the one guy that you trust? Who's the one guy, you like having in here? The two guys that he said would probably come out 1-2 in a vote would be C.J. Baxter and Liona Lefau. I mean, he's got that much respect and that guy's liking that much. What you describe, Bobby, I call them stabilizers. Like Barron Sorrell, to me, on last year's defense was a stabilizer. You got all these guys that can cause havoc around you, all these disruptors. Sometimes you just need a guy that can just stay home. You trust him to do his job. You trust him to be in the right place at the right time and really hold everything down. I think that's Liona Lefau. When I think about previous Texas defenses, and I'm going to go back a ways, I think about a guy like D.D. Lewis in the early 2000s. I think about a guy like Roderick Muckleroy in the late 2000s, especially Rod Muckleroy, when you've got, Kendall and Arakpo and all these guys flying around making plays. Sometimes you just need a guy that can be that stabilizing force that kind of stays home, is the glue guy that keeps everything together. I think that's what Liona Lefau can be for this defense. It's not the sexiest job in the world, but it's a really important job.
Jerry, your thought on Lefau?
Look, if you date back to Kahuku High, he was the leader of his defense and one of the leaders of a program that's had, over the years, has had 5 coaches win state championships. It's one of the storied programs in Hawaii. 20-plus NFL players have come out of school, Bobby. You could probably name 15 of them in your years doing this. If you come out of a program like that as a leader, there's a strong carryover to the who you are part of that. And I think that kind of speaks to what Sark is talking about. You don't just come from one of those programs and just be another guy in a locker room if you were a leader of the team that won 3 straight state titles. Just doesn't work that way. So, look, the steady Eddie, kind of like Baron Sorrell, is always going to be under-talked about. Not underappreciated, but under-talked about, right? But that guy is so steady in what he does. And I think from tackle to tackle, he is a tremendous instinctive linebacker. I think once you get outside the numbers, is he fast enough to close that much ground in the SEC? I think that, once you get outside those hash marks is more of a challenge for him, but he can drop in coverage. He's instinctive. But it's the everyday things he brings similar to Cedric Baxter, I think. Sark talks about those guys very similarly. He brings that everyday approach, and he brings it from one of the most storied programs in Hawaii in high school football. And again, if you're a captain and a leader of those teams, that's going to carry over to the college level.
Third linebacker was extraordinarily productive in the latter half of last season, but moved from edge to linebacker, ostensibly to improve his draft stock, we think, but also to bolster the linebacker core and maybe the flexibility within it. Y'all's thoughts on Trey Moore and what you've heard behind the scenes on his ability to work in coverage and work on the second level, as opposed to a guy that's on the line of scrimmage at all times. Jeff?
Yeah, we talked to Alan Clark before the season started and basically asked him, look, was this a Trey Moore for Brad Spence trade, trading one guy from the linebacker room to one guy for the edge room? And he said, that's kind of the way it turned out. And you watch Trey Moore, you play in space. I mean, he looks about as comfortable as a guy that, was a hand on the ground or edge guy could look. I think his presence at linebacker to me is really key for what Jerry was talking about earlier. When you get into some of these games, especially, look, with all due respect to San Jose State and Sam Houston and UTEP, when you get into some of these non-conference games where you maybe want to get Anthony Hill like a half and then get him out of there, well, okay, now you can get Trey Moore some snaps. And I know for those opponents, like, man, Trey Moore's a second-team linebacker. Like, what are we even doing here? But that gives you some flexibility. It gives you some position flex. And also, if you have an injury or something in the edge room, you can always spin him down and get him snapped. So Trey Moore, the thing I love about it most, Bobby, is they've manufactured depth in 2 position rooms by moving Trey Moore back to linebacker. And like Jerry said, whether you're talking about Ant Hill or even Colin Simmons, if you want to spin Trey Moore back down, you're able to distribute some snaps. So that way, hopefully all those guys, by the time you get to the end of the regular season and hopefully into another playoff run, those guys are, I guess, about as fresh and as healthy as you can be at the end of a 12-game regular season.
Yeah, Sark talked about it yesterday. He feels really good about the 2 deep there. Feels like he has multiple starters. Jerry, you go back and keep saying, and you've been saying it for a while now, that you think this is the best linebacking core Texas has had in some time. Is that because you think they are the deepest, they have the most playmakers, a combination of all of those things? I mean, what are the level of experience they have? Why is it that you're so high on this group?
I think it's a combination of all of it. And you look, Brad Spence is starting the season as an edge. But if there was an injury, he could come right back to linebacker where he played at Arkansas with 54 tackles and 4.5 sacks as a sophomore. We haven't even talked about Elijah Bo Barnes, who's been impressive at Texas as a freshman, but he's going to be seen more on special teams and in a reserve role. I think it's this height, weight, speed combo. They look more like an SEC linebacker crew now than they did a couple of years ago headed into the SEC for me. And it's the experience of Anthony Hill and Lefau. And Trey Moore is a college football player. And even a Brad Spence, if you had to move him back to linebacker. He's played a lot of snaps there. Then you have Ty Anthony Smith, who all these guys have different skill sets. And I think when you have a lot of really talented players with different skill sets, it's a defensive coordinator's dream because you can move around all your chess pieces and you can do a lot of things to put pressure on an opposing offense. And then I just look at how many guys can rush the passer from the linebacker position. Anthony Hill, Trey Moore. Again, whether if Brad Spence moved back to linebacker in a pinch, he's a pass rusher from that position. I think Ty Anthony Smith's going to be a pass rusher from that position because he's just so quick and reactive. So, and Bo Barnes, if he gets on the field, same, very similar, 6'1.5", 243. So I just think they have so much size, speed, combination, versatility. But when you have multiple guys that can rush the passer, I think that makes you really dangerous to the linebacker core. And I'm not comparing him, but look at what Nick Saban and Kirby Smart have done at the linebacker position in the SEC. I mean, they've had great defensive lines, but when you have all those linebackers and multiple guys can rush the passer, you can put a lot of pressure on the defense.
When I look at the group as a whole, and what I think, Jerry, you're the point you're hammering home is it's not just Anthony Hill. If it was just Anthony Hill, we could say, hey, this is the best Texas linebacker since.
Yeah.
And maybe you would throw out, I don't know, Jordan Hicks, right? You could say that, or you could look at it and say they've got multiple guys that are NFL guys at the same time that are in the upper class levels, and they've got a young guy that is the wild card right now, and Ty Anthony Smith, that we think is, and Sark has mentioned, has this a little something to him that Sark has identified. So I think that my only qualm about labeling them the best at this point is they got to go out and do it. And that's one. I do have two. The second is the health. I mean, this is not you only have 4. That's not extraordinarily deep unless, as Jerry mentioned, you move Brad Spence back perhaps if you have to. And that gives you 5. And that, I think, is why Texas is focused so heavily on linebacker in this recruiting class. Not only Tyler Atkinson, but also Cozy Akpala. And they still want one more, Jerry, because they didn't get as many as they wanted last year. Yep. Kellen Wiley went elsewhere at the last minute, and they just had Bo Barnes, who's looked good, and Jonathan Cunningham, who's seeing a lot of time at nickel, actually, in a big nickel package right now. So it's interesting in that I think the first 4 are, to your point, Jerry, and maybe even a 5th are ready to go. But, they're not super deep there. They got that first 2 levels, and then it's like, wait a minute, we may have to go to a young guy. But we'll see what happens. I do think that they are keeping Anthony Hill at bay a little bit in fall camp and trying to make sure they keep his body fresh and also get reps for other folks. All right, before we let y'all go, and I'm going to ask guys one more question. I do want to say thank you to our friends over at Allegiant Digital Marketing. For more than 25 years, Allegiant Digital Marketing founder and CEO Chad Markham, a UT grad and instructor of the Digital Marketing Boot Camp at UT Austin, has helped thousands of businesses overcome marketing challenges, take advantage of their Hook 'em Horn special, and save up to $2,500 in advertising. Again, visit allegiantdigital.com/ontexasfootball to learn more today. Jeff and Jerry, to sum up, we started this off by talking about how good they were. Y'all have any final thoughts before we head into 2025 with this linebacking group?
For me, it goes back to kind of what Jerry was talking about a minute ago. You've got so many guys now that can rush the passer. And I think when the off-ball linebacker position has been one that I think other Texas staffs previously struggled to kind of identify the type of guys that they needed there. But I think now, even making a transition to the SEC, I think this staff has kind of figured it out. Yes, size, speed ratio is big, but I think they're putting a premium on guys who can get after the quarterback because of the different looks you can show, because of the way you can position those guys. Pete Kwiatkowski is never going to be a big blitz guy, but the way they're going about pressure, they want that pressure to be organic, and they realize they can get it from the second level because of the guys they have access to in recruiting. I think, honestly, guys, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg for what we're going to see from the Texas defense from now on. I think year after year after year, the goal for them is have multiple guys at both the first and second level of the defense that can get after the quarterback.
Jerry?
Yes, so I 100% agree with Jeff. What's going to be interesting to kind of watch this year with this group, Clemson went at Anthony Hill in coverage, right? Trey Moore when he's on the field, I think people are going to try to attack him in coverage. And they're going to try to attack Anthony Hill and see if Anthony Hill's taking that next big step in coverage. If these guys pass the coverage test, it's going to be hard for offense to find answers against the Texas linebackers. That's going to be, to me, the deal at the end of the day.
Yeah, they got to run with the tight ends.
Yeah.
We've talked about that. Trey Moore in particular is going to have to do that and cover those guys up the seam and get on them on out routes. But we'll see how that goes. All right, that's going to do it. I want to add my last piece on it. I could see multiple fronts where they have three linebackers on the field. Texas has traditionally run, and almost all of college football has gone to this 4-2-5 look with a base nickel in the game. I think that putting Trey Moore on the field allows you maybe to go to some true three linebacker looks that you can rotate out of.
Well, to add to that, Bobby, I know Brad Spence is being called an edge, but when he lines up at edge, he's a linebacker. He played linebacker at Arkansas. So essentially what you're talking about there, that gives you more versatility because you can use those linebackers as a rusher and drop Brad Spence in the coverage, which he's already done 2 years at Arkansas.
Yeah.
And it's about dictating matchups too, Jerry. I mean, I know we all love the NASCAR package and it was great last year, but with the versatility and the depth that you've got now, I mean, if you're PK, you can have a third and long package, a third and medium package, a second down package. I mean, pretty much based on the versatility, the football IQ, the bodies you've got at linebacker and edge, the combinations you can put on the field, it's pretty much left up to the imagination at that point.
Yeah, Jeff, you mentioned diversity and looks early in this podcast, and I completely agree. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. We'll be back this evening with the live stream, myself, Jerry, and Rod Babers, talking a little bit of practice from yesterday's scrimmage, talking practice, guys. Anyways, thank you again for watching. You guys have a good Sunday. For Jerry Hamilton, Jeff Howe, and our producer, Matt Hutchison, I'm Bobby Burton. You guys have a good one. Hook 'em horns.